Welcome to Deep Cyber's weekly cybersecurity briefing. Here's what has unfolded over the past week. This week, one idea connects every story. The rules that once governed the digital world are being rewritten. Who attacks, who defends, who holds the data, and who gets to decide? None of those answers look the same as they did even a year ago. Let's start with the threat that is closest to home for most organizations. Phishing, the scam where attackers pretend to be someone you trust to steal your password, your money, or your data. New research shows the total number of phishing attempts has dropped by 20%. Before you relax, hear the other half of that sentence. The attacks that are happening are succeeding at a much higher rate. Criminals have stopped casting wide nets and started hunting with precision, using artificial intelligence to craft messages that mimic the tone of a trusted colleague, reference real details about your life, and slide straight past the filters your organization relies on. The volume is down, but the danger is up. Ask yourself honestly, when did your team last update its awareness training? And just as we see attackers raising their game, law enforcement landed a meaningful counterpunch. INTERPOL coordinated an operation called Operation Ramz, running from October 2025 through February 2026, which brought down a platform called Sniper DZ, a service that sold phishing tools by subscription to criminals who lacked the skills to build them themselves. 13 countries across the Middle East and North Africa participated, resulting in 201 arrests, including the platform's primary administrator, who had kept the operation running for roughly 10 years. What makes this significant is not just the arrests, it is what was dismantled. Platforms like this are criminal supply chains. They lower the barrier to entry, turning phishing into a product anyone can rent. Cutting off the infrastructure matters more than chasing individual users. The lesson for business: the ecosystem enabling attacks on your organization is organized, commercial, and now, increasingly, a target for coordinated global enforcement. Following the money is exactly how the next takedown unfolded. European law enforcement, coordinated by EuroPol, dismantled a service called Audi A6, which specialized in laundering the cryptocurrency profits earned by ransomware gangs, the criminal groups that break into your systems, lock your files, and demand payment to restore access. Because cryptocurrency transactions are traceable on public ledgers called blockchains, criminals need intermediaries to make their stolen funds appear legitimate. Audi A6 was that intermediary, and it processed an estimated 336 million euros, roughly 389 million US dollars, in illicit funds before it was shut down. Cutting off the money is as powerful as cutting off the attack itself. When criminal groups cannot convert stolen cryptocurrency into usable cash, the business model breaks down. For organizations that have ever faced a ransomware demand, this is a reminder that behind every ransom note is a financial network, and that network is now firmly in law enforcement's crosshairs. But not every threat comes from independent criminals chasing profit. Some of the most capable and persistent attackers in the world are on government payrolls. New findings confirm that North Korea and China have each built state-sponsored hacking operations that generate measurable economic value for their governments, particularly across the Asia-Pacific region. North Korea's gross domestic product has grown, in part, because of money stolen by its government-directed cyber teams who target financial firms, cryptocurrency platforms, and businesses to siphon funds that flow back into national programs, including weapons development. China's state-backed groups focus less on direct theft and more on stealing sensitive business intelligence and government secrets, handing Chinese industries a competitive advantage that no trade deal can easily address. The implication for any organization operating in globally competitive markets is stark. You may not just be defending against criminals, you may be defending against a government. Governments, of course, also need to defend themselves, and the approach taken by the United States government to that challenge just changed in a meaningful way. The US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, known as CISA, has issued a new directive telling federal agencies to stop prioritizing software patches based purely on numerical severity scores, and to start prioritizing based on actual real-world risk. The old system, called CVSS, or Common Vulnerability Scoring System, rated flaws on technical characteristics alone. A high score meant patch it first, whether or not attackers were actively exploiting it. The new directive says, focus on the vulnerabilities that are actually being weaponized against your specific systems. Security professionals have argued for years that a moderately rated flaw being actively exploited is more dangerous than a technically severe one that nobody is targeting. The government has now agreed. Private sector organizations watching the shift should ask whether their own patching decisions are driven by real risk or simply by chasing numbers on a chart. From how governments patch their systems to who they trust with their data, that tension is now reshaping the entire global technology landscape. The European Parliament made a pointed institutional statement in early June by switching its default search engine from Google to Qwant, a French alternative built on the principle of not tracking users. The change applied automatically to the browsers used by the Parliament's 720 elected members, along with thousands of staff. The move is not just about privacy preferences. It arrives on the same day the European Commission announced a broader technology sovereignty package covering chips, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. A cross-party group of 38 European lawmakers had already urged Parliament leadership in late 2025 to begin phasing out American-made software. Europe has talked about digital sovereignty for years. It is now making institutional decisions to back up that talk. And those institutional decisions escalated sharply with the legislation that followed. On June the 3rd, 2026, the European Commission introduced the Cloud and AI Development Act, its most significant move yet to assert control over the bloc's digital infrastructure. The act would bar American cloud providers, specifically Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, from winning contracts for the EU's most sensitive government operations, including banking, energy, and healthcare. The reason is a US law from 2018 called the Cloud Act, which allows US federal authorities to compel American companies to hand over data stored anywhere in the world, including in European data centers. For EU governments managing sensitive citizen and national security data, that legal exposure is simply unacceptable. Consider the scale. US providers currently control more than 70% of the EU cloud market, while European providers hold just 15%. The legislation introduces a 4-tier classification system with sovereignty requirements at the top levels that American companies cannot legally satisfy under the Cloud Act. This is not a regulatory adjustment. It is a direct challenge to the business models of 3 of the world's largest technology companies, and a signal that the conversation about who controls critical digital infrastructure has moved from conference rooms to law. Step back and look at this week as a whole, and the pattern is unmistakable. The old defaults are failing. Default trust in a familiar email. Default reliance on a numerical score to decide what to fix. Default dependence on foreign clouds to store sovereign data. Every story this week is about an organization, an institution, or an entire continent deciding that the old defaults are no longer good enough, and that the cost of not changing them is now higher than the cost of change itself. The question worth sitting with is simple. What defaults is your organization still running on? Before you go, if this briefing gave you useful insight this week, follow Deep Cyber wherever you're listening. A rating or comment helps the right people discover the show. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and we'll be back next week with more cyber security updates.